Every great team is only as successful as its core. For the Browns to win the AFC North in 2024, they will need their core of players to step up. The question is, who is the core for the Cleveland Browns? We'll discuss it now. Your latest Locked On Browns starts now.
You are Locked On Browns, your daily Cleveland Browns podcast. Part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Welcome back, my friends, to the show that never ends, your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound, LGB, and the LOB, the Locked On Browns podcast, brought to you by the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. I am your host, Jeff Lloyd. We are joined by the OBR's Pete Smith. We appreciate everybody that makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd keeps growing and growing. Don't miss out. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It's always free wherever you get your podcasts. Today's episode is brought to you by FanDuel. Make every moment more. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. Visit FanDuel.com/locked-on to get started. As I mentioned at the open, I think the aspirations and the expectations of the Cleveland Browns in 2024 should be extremely high. Certainly, a lot of teams within the AFC North are going through changes. But I think for the Browns, I think, a lot of it is based on, what has been here and what it did in 2023, taking the next level. A lot of the other teams in the AFC North, a lot of newness and a lot of things that need to basically step up for teams to stay in the contention of where they were or to get in the contention of where they were not in 2023. Pete, it's obvious, most of everything Cleveland Browns wise starts with Myles Garret. Delivered certainly last year when the defense was improved so vastly, became Defensive Player of the Year, the player that, many Browns fans have seen for years now, completely fully on display and, found a way to even take it up another notch, finally playing with players a little bit more suited to his skill level on the field. There's no question that it all starts certainly on the defensive side of the ball with number 95 and a hell of a leadoff hitter apparently as well.
Yeah, I mean, he's sort of the Hobie Landreth of the softball world. Look, Myles Garret leads the defense. Myles Garret, when he was healthy, shoulder fully intact, you saw the best of him. I mean, he basically put the team on his back against the Colts and won it almost by himself, like leading them to 20 of their 38 points. He is a closer in terms of how much pressure he generates in the fourth quarter. He made a bunch of big time sacks in big spots. And then when the shoulder was injured, he was still able to dominate in terms of win rate and those type of things. But he wasn't getting the quarterback as quickly because he didn't have all of his ability, and the defense suffered a little bit as a result. You saw other guys' sack numbers go up, but it's just not the same. He sets the tone for everything. And there's going to be a game, as long as he's healthy, where he can basically win it by himself. He's a franchise level, in terms of impact, he's a franchise quarterback type of player in terms of what he does for the defense and what he does for the entire team. He's in that mold of what J.J. Watt was before him, even though J.J. Watt has no capacity to understand how good Garrett is. But that's just the level of impact he has. He makes everything better and he has the capacity to not only win a game, he has the capacity to win them a playoff game.
Well, sometimes, when your mantra in life is, I am my brother's keeper, it may cloud your judgment as to what's truly going on in the rest of the NFL. I mean, I'm sure we'd get the same chat if we were talking fullbacks within the NFL as well from Mr. J.J. Watt. But Pete, this does kind of bring up kind of the question here, though, is it's tough to find maybe who is that second in line on the defensive side of the ball when you're talking about a player that is as gifted as Myles Garret is. But if you're talking top four and basically the most important four Cleveland Browns for 2024, is there one? Is there possibly two that exist on the defensive side of the ball?
In terms of guys who are part of that core package, I mean, I wouldn't put them in there, but you could certainly make an argument. I mean, I think Grant Delpit has to be one of those guys because, look, I mean, your immediate instinct would be, well, Denzel Ward. But the thing is, the Browns have like such good corner depth
And we've gone through this where we've missed Denzel at times, and this group has shown, obviously, they can get it done.
Like, he's capable of being a tremendous corner and can sort of lift the defense in a way that, like, other guys aren't capable, but, like, they can get by without him. Whereas Grant Delpit, the reason they extended him is because he can do everything they need a safety to do. He can play deep. He can play in the slot. He can play in the box and blitz. Like, he can do all the things. He can cover a tight end. Has done it. Like, part of the reason he got that contract is what he can do with just Mark Andrews. He does everything for you. And the Browns were able to sort of survive without him, but it's not the same. He just makes that big of an impact, and they need him to be that dude. And then the other guy you can make a case for, even though I hate the position he plays, in terms of how much I want to spend on resources, is JOK. JOK, 20 tackles for loss in this past year. He can be – the reason you want to extend him is because he does things that aren't just what you expect a linebacker to do. He can make plays behind the line of scrimmage. He can make plays in coverage. He can blow up a screen. His speed is like a true, trump card in terms of just what he can do that other guys just can't. He has the capacity to just he made his first Pro Bowl, as did Delpit this past year. But JOK, whether or not he's ever going to get the recognition, just because there's it's one of those positions where you sort of have guys that are entrenched there, and deservedly so. He may never make All Pro, but like, he has that type of impact where he can sort of be that type of dude for you that just plays way above what you expect just a linebacker to do.
And I think the thing, and I love that you brought up JOK here, because I'm kind of in total agreement, though. But a lot of this, and this is no disrespect in any way whatsoever towards Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, and you guys heard me talk last year at length where I continuously said about Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah, I felt he was one of the most improved defensive players in the entire NFL, and nobody gave him the credit for it. But a lot of being a successful player at the position that Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah plays is that guys in front of you are doing their jobs. Your job, if you're JOK, is to make all these plays. But for years, and you've heard me and Pete cry about this for years, is there was never even close to adequate defensive tackle play within this roster. When you brought in a guy like Jim Schwartz, who values inside pass rush just as much as he values outside pass rush, so an emphasis was finally made to improve the interior defensive front. Not only did you get to see all the good that came from that, you also got to see a player like Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah excel. It was kind of there early in his career, but it was really hard when you weren't being able to just go read and go make things happen. JOK was able to do that in 2024. We're going to continue here. Your latest Locked On Browns, the OBR's Pete Smith. Appreciate everybody for being along for the ride. Summertime means baseball for some of us, the NBA Finals and more, and you can bet on it all on FanDuel. Right now, new customers get $200 in bonus bets with any winning $5 bet. That's $200 you can use to bet everything from the Finals MVP to who's going to hit one out of the park. Visit FanDuel.com/lockedon and add a big win to your summer bucket list. FanDuel, America's #1 sportsbook. Your latest Locked On Browns continues. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. Of course, I appreciate you all for making Locked On Browns your first listen every single day. The everyday crowd keeps getting bigger and bigger. Do not miss out. Make sure you subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. The show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. The OBR's Pete Smith. We are talking about who is basically the core of this 2024 Cleveland Browns roster. And between those four, what is going to take for those four to make it click and the other 49 in tow for hopefully the Cleveland Browns to win that illustrious 2024 AFC North, something they've been chasing since the return in 1999. I guess we'll go to this one early. Pete, you have to figure, if you're mentioning this, you have to mention Deshaun Watson. It may not technically be deserved right now, but it is a major factor. And if the Cleveland Browns can even get close to the quarterback play from Deshaun Watson that they were hoping when they made this major acquisition and all the investments that went into it, he has to kind of be on this list. And if it doesn't work that way, and maybe he doesn't play the way everybody's hoping, with hopefully a full season under him, you kind of see how maybe it didn't get there.
Yeah, I mean, look, you gave up 7 draft picks or whatever it is. You signed him to $230 million. If he's not on this list, it's a problem. Like, this is what he's there for. Now, I
remember we had this conversation, I believe it was last year. I said, wow, they named Deshaun Watson captain. And I believe your exact retort was, they have to make Deshaun Watson the captain.
Yeah, like, look, I look at his numbers. They're awful. Like, if you just look at what he's done in the 12 games he's played, they're terrible. I am of the belief that if he's just on the field and healthy, he will figure it out. Whether that gets to the level that people are looking back at the Houston Texans time, one, they don't need him to do that. And two, like, the Browns are a completely different team. But ultimately, I think if he's on the field, he can get there. But if he's not, if he just, one, is either gets hurt or two, just doesn't get there, then the Browns are stuck with him for another year, but they have to start looking. Now, I don't know if this draft class coming up is the one you want, but like, you at least at that point are sort of like, who's out there? What's the landscape like? There's no getting around it, because you can't potentially waste careers of Myles Garret and some of these other guys. You have to try to figure out a way to win. I mean, you are at that point a roster that's a quarterback away. So he has to be that guy. That's what the money's for. So we'll see if he can stay there. Again, I think the ability is there. He just needs to be on the field and play. I think, watching him sort of talk about it, he has, between the injury and everything else, I think he's been a guy who's been trying to make $230 million throws all the time. And that's going to get you beat. It doesn't work that way, in addition to the shoulder injuries and everything else. And then he's talked about this. It sort of finally clicked in the second half of the Ravens game. You don't need to. Like, I know Nate Tice like dismissed him as dump off or screens against the Ravens going 14-14, which is preposterous given the throw he made to Amari Cooper that like they had. Mm-hmm. But like, take the profit. Like, I don't care. You take the easy ones. Get yourself up, get yourself comfortable, get in that rhythm. So then when you need to make those throws, you're capable of it. But you don't need to like up the degree of difficulty just because of the contract. And because like there are people who think like Deshaun's content to just take the money. Like I think he's pressing so hard. And the movie that always stands out to me, I'm sure you remember The Fan, starring Robert De Niro and Wesley Snipes.
Outstanding movie. It's
hilarious to me because like Robert De Niro tries to murder this man for doing exactly what he should do. Like his Wesley Snipes is Bobby Rayburn is like, he goes, what was the secret? He's like, I stopped caring. And like, he phrases it horribly, but he stopped pressing and just sort of let it happen. And then he starts raking. I think Deshaun Watson has to sort of find the right balance of where you're just like, I'm just taking what's there. I'm not pressing every play. And I think it will happen. And I think that happens by just playing football and just being out there. And like the thing, if you track through like season after season after season, the guys who win the Super Bowl are quarterbacks who have stayed healthy the whole season. Even if you get like nicked up and you're playing through something, you lose typically. You don't have guys who are like sort of battling through it who tend to make the Super Bowl or win the Super Bowl. Like you've got to get very fortunate with that. So he's got to stay healthy, obviously, and he's got to be on the field. And I think if those two things happen, you're going to see him get a whole lot better. I certainly like the way that they're trying to do things that work for him offensively, but I also don't think that's the issue. I really just think it's about him getting comfortable. I think the offense, the way they're trying to evolve the offense is for the sake of the offense. It's trying to get ahead of everybody else in the same way the Ravens sort of could have been fine if they stuck with Greg Roman, but they looked at it and said, we can do better than this. I think that's the Browns thing. In as much as, yes, it's about Watson, I do think it's for its own sake.
Well, there's a couple things to go with here. And yes, Robert De Niro was fantastic as Curly. Bobby, and talking about his love of the Rolling Stones.
It's such a great awful movie.
It is absolutely.
He's literally a psychopath when he goes Little League Dad.
There is, and even still, it comes on for this second. That's one of those ones you just put the remote down and you're good. But I think your point is there's nothing Deshaun can do to erase the past. There's nothing he can do. So, and look, there are a lot of athletes that have gone through this. You go through an injury and you want to make up this, that, and the other thing. In any way whatsoever, there's nothing Deshaun Watson can do to erase for what people think of him or for the fact that he has not been able to perform number one first year. He was missed 11 games due to suspension. Last year, the injury. There is nothing Deshaun Watson could do to erase that. So, yes, going out there, just letting it rip and focusing on the now and the here and the today. But the most important thing is you can never get in a zone doing anything unless you're doing it. So, missing the first 11 games of the Cleveland Browns' career. And this was the problem we all had is, unless Jacoby Brissett plays absolutely lights out, Deshaun's going to come back and everybody's going to look like, all right, well, we need you to go 6-0. And the expectations were already out of control. Last year, it was, I'm still of one that think there was some real good. The Ravens was really good. The Titans was really good. I think people are going to find, bad things. And yes, the interception early before he got yanked in the Indianapolis Colts game, that was the prime example of trying to say, I'll prove to you I'm a $230 million man with this throw. And it did not work. It did not connect. And obviously, later he took a hit he wasn't ready for. He shouldn't have been out there that day. And that's fine. But Deshaun Watson, he needs to focus on 24. But go ahead.
4-1. I
yes,
as bad as he was, and obviously they played some bad teams, but it goes to show you he doesn't need to be Superman. He needed to be franchise quarterback against the Ravens, but they won the other 3 games with all the issues with it. They're good enough to do that. That's part of the thing is he's got to trust that he's got a defense. He's got to trust that he's got teammates that will help him out.
Well, and that's even the funniest thing because you go back to week 1 of last year. Everybody wanted to make every excuse in the world for Joe Burrow. For first things first, it's not like Joe Burrow is a dome quarterback. He literally, 3 hours down the state is where Joe Burrow plays. So they both played in poor weather. One of them looked good that day. One of them looked good. Granted, it took almost a quarter and a half, maybe a little more, before Deshaun got in the zone and started making some plays. But, there's just – and look, granted, it's his own doing. And he's probably always going to be held to a higher standard than most other guys are. But you've just got to basically look at it and, don't look at the name, don't look at the jersey, watch the individual play. He was getting it done last year. But the biggest thing Deshaun needs to do is needs to just worry about the here and the now and staying healthy week in, week out. That is the most important thing because if Deshaun Watson plays a full 17-game season, we're going to see a lot more familiar version that we're used to of Deshaun Watson. Not the one that missed 11 games, not the one that played half the season last year and then had a season cut short. You just don't really lose talent like that. It just doesn't go away. He hasn't had an injury that would take away that type of talent. We're going to continue here, and we're going to see where it goes on the offensive side of the ball because another question is brought up as to who maybe fits into this Browns core, and it makes for a tough one. Latest Locked On Browns continues. Nobody go anywhere. Segment 3, your latest Locked On Browns, your host, Jeff Lloyd, joined by always good buddy, good friend, maybe eats dinner a little bit too early, the awesome Pete Smith from the OBR. Now, Pete, if we ever had a conversation like this about any given season, Cleveland Browns-wise, since 2018, Nick Chubb would be mentioned here. And again, now he's one of those ones, does he get mentioned? Does he not get mentioned? Certainly for a different circumstance, which we all know. And look, for all you out there, I hate that you do this. Oh, well, I guarantee you Nick Chubb's going to play in September. Well, don't do that. Why would you even do that? Nick Chubb will be back when Nick Chubb's going to be back. Would everybody love that Nick Chubb is ready to go and can play in a 17-game? This isn't something we're taking stances on. It's about something trying to be realistic about what Nick can be this year. If he plays 17 games this year and I was wrong and I told you he wasn't going to be there, I won't care. I'm going to sit there every Sunday and say, heck yeah, we got Nick Chubb. But so then that comes to it. Is it maybe Amari or is it maybe who is that next guy? Because we know what Amari's going to give you. So this all comes into, and if it's a lineman, well, I mean, it's hard to pick out just one.
No,
who, Pete, from the offensive side would be that guy?
Well, for one, it's Joe Bitonio, period. Like Joe Bitonio.
A healthier Joe Bitonio.
I have
condolences to Joe Bitonio and his family. Obviously, losing his mom's a difficult spot.
I am looking for Wyatt Teller to have a big year. One, because they need him to, and two, because the way the offense at least what I think is going to change, favors what he does well. But Joe Bitonio played all of last year in immense pain. And I think with the knee that he had surgery on during the season, during the bye week, and then I think because of the way he was playing on his knee, that's what caused his back to lock up. I can't prove it, neither can he, but I think that's what happened. And then he suffers he suffers the horrific high ankle sprain in the playoff game and keeps playing through it. You know, sort of, you and I talked to him about this, but like, I think that was sort of, the mindset he sort of got from JC Treader playing through pain. But like Joel Bitonio, and I think a lot of people are sort of looking at him going, well, maybe it's because he's 30. It's not. Like, nope. He was a shell of himself. He had his, if you go by PFF, he had his worst year as a run blocker. And obviously we look at the tackle injuries and everything else. But Joe Bitonio still was a very, very, very efficient pass protector and everything. But like, if he's healthy, like he can be, I think he can get back to being an all-pro because that's what he is. And that will set the tone. Like, everybody's sitting here worrying. And I understandably, I think it's fair to sit there and go, what are they going to do with the tackle situation? They're still coming back from injury. But if Joe Bitonio is back, the line will immensely improve because he's that good. But beyond
even still, this just brings up an odd question. Was Ethan Posick the Browns' best offensive lineman last year?
No, it's Teller. It's Teller.
Okay.
But like, Teller didn't have a outstanding year, but he was good. Like, certainly good. And I think Wyatt Teller got hurt a little bit. One, by first playing with DeWand, who's not a good run blocker at this point. And then, we got a little splash of James Hudson, like against the Ravens, where you went, "Oh, holy crap!" But like overall, like the running game just not good. Then at the other side, like Amari Cooper is certainly a phenomenal player, but I look at him a little bit in the same vein I do Denzel Ward, and that's not because like I can sit here and go, "Well, of course Jerry Jeudy and Elijah Moore and Cedric Tillman are going to be great," but I have way more faith in those guys than most people do. One, I will ride or die with Elijah Moore forever because of his psychotic relationship with football. I worry about him without football. I think Cedric Tillman's good. Like, I think this passes
the off the bus test. That's for damn sure.
Cedric Tillman was not too slow, was not too small, was not weak, was not anything else. He got open and caught the ball. All he has to do is just get more comfortable in doing the things that an NFL offense asked him to do that Tennessee's Mickey Mouse offense never did.
And it would also help if he had the same quarterback every week.
And I think, like, to your point, like, having seen him in person, he's a large man. He stands out physically. So even if he's your number 4 receiver, you're in a good spot. So I think those guys will be fine, which is why David Njoku is so important. David Njoku needs to have repeat last year's success with this year. One, they don't have another tight end. Like, Jordan Akins ain't that dude. And if David Njoku were to get hurt, other than some like packaged personnel groups, I think they're just going 4 and 5 wide at that point. Like, they will just move on. But like, David Njoku has so much ability as a run blocker, as what he's been able to do in pass catching. Like, and I know a lot of people will point to like, oh man, David Njoku is really good with Joe Flacco. It definitely didn't start there. It started like and he sort of touched on this. The Ravens game was sort of his moment where he sort of figured out how good he could be. And then you watch him carry it over the next week against the Steelers with DTR. And then it sort of took off. Now, obviously there's more pressure to sort of with Deshaun Watson to allow Njoku to be that guy and continue to be the great player that, like, statistically that we saw. But what he could do to open up this offense, because when you already have Amari Cooper, when you add Jerry Jeudy, when you have Elijah Moore, when you have Cedric Tillman, you put all these guys on the field, like, somebody's still got to find Njoku. And if they are all worried about these other receivers and he's getting like limited matchups or guys who can't really hang with him, he's going to crush people. Like, he has that capacity where you can throw, and this is what happened. They give him like a 3-yard dump off and he just run through a couple people or run around people. Like, he became a guy you could not get down on first contact. So with all the other weapons they have and whatever Nick Chubb's going to be able to bring and Jerome Ford and all these other things, like, David Njoku is primed to have a monster year, so long as the quarterback position is what is capable of happening. So those are the guys. Bitonio and Njoku are the guys that stand out to me, and then I get to Amari Cooper and some of the other guys. But like Bitonio's, if he can be an All-Pro again, the line will be completely revitalized. If Njoku carries it over, this offense is going to be nasty.
Well, and the thing with Joe Bitonio is Joe Bitonio wouldn't be here anymore if he didn't believe he still had All-Pro ability. Now, look, you get injured and he went through what he went through last year, yes. But if Joe Bitonio felt he could not go out there and basically say, I will play like Joe Bitonio is not going to show up. He's not going to cash his checks. It's just the way the guy is wired. Obviously, Pete had a really good relationship with him. We had him once on the show, and he does not hide who he is. That's just the way he is. The thing with David, and this was always going to be the case, but it just never got there. When you had Baker here in 2018, the first game they played was a preseason against the New York Giants. Baker threw 2 touchdowns to David Njoku, and it was the old simple adage of, the linebackers can't run with him, and he's way too big for safeties. I think it was Jabril Peppers who tried to go low on him, and he dusted him and went in for the end zone. Next one, Baker threw it to the back of the end zone. There wasn't a linebacker. There wasn't a safety that could jump with the former high jump guy, David Njoku. Caught the ball, touchdown, easy enough. But with this, look, there are going to be a lot of important factors here for the Browns in 2024, trying to define who maybe are the 4 most important. And look, at the end of it, it probably all does come down to, what Deshaun Watson can give this team. And for those of you that want to be naysayers about it, look, didn't get nearly what you thought you were going to get from Deshaun Watson last year. And it still found a way to work out. That's what happens when your roster is built correctly. That's what happens when you have the correct other pieces in place. That also happens when you have a great, great staff from top to bottom, general manager, coaching staff, et cetera, et cetera. Cleveland Browns are in a very good place. These are things that we used to never, ever say years ago. He is Pete Smith over with the OBR. Obviously, Pete continues to crush it, daily content over there, as starting to make this odd transition, from OTAs to the mini camp, and then that lull, and then we fire it all up in late July as everybody travels on down to West Virginia, and we kick off 2024. Make sure you're following @_Pete Smith _. I'm your host, Jeff Lloyd. I appreciate everybody who makes Locked On Browns their first listen every single day. The everyday crowd, you're a bunch of filthy animals, but you are my filthy animals. I suggest you join the filthy animals. Subscribe to Locked On Browns YouTube channel. Show is always available. It is always free wherever you get your podcasts. This has been your daily delivery of all things Dog Pound. LGB on ELOB. Let's go, Browns.